Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back for another Unreal tutorial. Today we're going to go over a pretty simple and a really cool mechanic from the new Red Dead Redemption game. It's where we can go slow motion, we can kind of queue up a bunch of targets, and that we can release and then it'll shoot all of our targets really quickly. So this is kind of what our end result will look like. In that we can walk up, we can kind of slow-mo, you can see how things are moving slow. I can target my enemies a few times, and when I release, it'll go in order and it'll shoot all of our targets. So that's really simple, and I think the cool thing about this is it's going to take us maybe like 15 minutes to set up, and that it's really kind of modular in that you can throw this into your own code very easily. None of this is going to be like specific to this project. So what we can do now is this is a brand new project that I literally just opened. I haven't touched a single thing in it. And for simplicity's sake, we're going to make this in first person, but what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in content from the third person feature or the content pack. So I'm going to do add new, add feature or content pack, and I'm just going to add in the third person just so I can get those third person characters in there. That's just why I'm doing that. So with that set up, now we have our first person character, and if we go into the third person blueprint folder, we can drop in some third person characters just for the things that we're going to shoot in a minute. So let's grab those. So that'll be our 3 targets in a minute. So now let's set up 2 new inputs. So we're going to go under Edit, Project Settings, and I'm going to add 2 new inputs to the base project, to the base first person project. So we're going to add a new action mapping. Let's add 2 more. The first one, I'm just going to call it slow-mo. This is going to be our key to enable the slow motion. I'm just going to set it to shift. Once again, you can set it to whatever you want. And then I'm also going to make, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to make a reload. I'm going to set this to R. I'm just going to make a super simple reload mechanic just so that we can replicate a gun having a few bullets type of thing. Alright, so now let's open up our first person character. So I'm just going to click it, and then with it selected on the top right here, we can just open the blueprint. It's just a little bit of a faster way of doing that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete a little bit of code here, just some old blueprints that are included in this. I don't want to include any touch. I'm just going to delete that out, just to clean this up a bit so that we don't have a bunch of just random stuff sitting around. So I think that is good. Alright, so now what we want to do is let's just go right into it. Let's just create a new variable and let's just call this slow-mo. And this will be the variable, a boolean, that we store to know whether or not we're in slow motion. So let's do that, and let's grab a branch here and let's get on fire. So when we left click, what we want to see is whether or not we're in this slow motion. So we're going to do a branch, and if we're not in the slow motion, off of false, we're just going to hook up the normal shooting code. We're just going to go with it, and we're just going to do our normal shooting. And that's a little annoying. Let's grab that and delete that. There we go. Sorry, that was just annoying me. And then if we are in the slow motion, that's when we're going to start getting into kind of the special part of this. I'm going to give myself some room. Let's actually drag this down a bit. Let's get that away from everything. Alright, so if we are in slow motion, well, what do we want to do? Well, I know kind of what we want to do is we want to do a trace out in front of our gun. And we want to see what we're aiming at. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use that location that we're aiming at, and we're going to store it so that we can later use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a line trace for objects. And now what we want to search for, the object type that we want to search for, I'm going to do a make array off of that, is we want to search for pawn. And the reason why we're searching for pawn is because pawn is kind of the default type that you see for characters like this. If we go into this collision, it should be collision preset is pawn. That's just the third person character. Normally pawn collision is what you use for things that move around because that's what a pawn is. So that is what we're searching for. And well, how are we going to search for it? Well, this is kind of the weird janky part, is that inside of this first person project, where the default crosshair gets drawn on our screen is actually kind of awkward. So what I want to actually do is I want to search for HUD, and there's a default first person HUD that's included with this. And this is something I noticed that was just a little annoying when I set this up. They offset the crosshair from the middle of the screen, and I actually kind of want to just delete that because it's going to make it really awkward for us to see where we're aiming when our crosshair isn't actually in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to delete that. I think they did that because the projectile that you shoot in the first person project is like a lobbed projectile, and I think that's why they did that. I'm not really sure. It's just weird. So with that deleted, I can close the HUD now. So now we can do a line trace a lot easier at where we're aiming with our gun. So what we want to do is we want to get let's get the world location of our first person camera. And this is going to be the starting point for our trace. And the ending point of our trace is actually going to be the forward vector of our camera. And if you know what a forward vector is, if you watch my vector map videos, is a forward vector is normalized, so it has a length of 1, so we need to multiply that by a float. And what we multiply by right here is going to be the max distance that we're willing to trace. A number like 3,000, I guess, is fine. This is something that you can customize for your game depending on how far you want the player to be able to do this. Maybe it's indefinite, maybe it's only 100 yards, whatever it happens to be. So let's add that back into our world location. Since this is a relative location, we need to add that back into our world location to make it a world location. And now that will be our ending point. So let's try that out, and we're going to print that this line that we're doing here. Let's make it debug draw persistent so we can see it. So now we need to do one more thing. Just for testing purposes, let's open that back up. We need to make slow-mo by default. Let's just check it to be on just for now so we can just test this out. So with that on, if I click, you can see we're doing line traces, and you can see we are hitting. So you can see I can click. It's a little bit offset, just slightly it looks like, but I guess that's okay. Because once again, this aiming, this should be what code you're using to aim your guns normally. However you spawn your bullets normally should be kind of how you're doing this line trace, because you want that to mimic. So at least here we can see where we're hitting, and now what we want to do is where we're hitting here, where we see that red little mark, that's where we're going to store our hit location essentially. So what we want to do is if we hit something, I'm going to do off a branch after the line trace. If we hit something, let's break our hit result. And now what we want to do with that location is we actually want to spawn something there, right? We want to visually see that we have a hit marker for what we're going to shoot. To me, kind of maybe the easiest way to do this is let's create a billboard component. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a billboard component. So on true, we're going to add a billboard component. I don't really care about the transform because we're going to manually attach that. So I'm just going to throw in a transform. Let's make the location of our hit. Let's check manual attachment. And now what we want to do is we want to type in attach, and we get two attached components. We want attach to actor. So at this bottom one, it says attaches the root component of this actors to the supplemented component. So that works for me. Let's move this up just a little bit just to give ourselves a little room. There we go. And now what we want to do is we want to target the enemy that we hit. So the hit actor that we hit, let's do it there. And maybe let's actually do one more thing. Let's actually cast the hit actor that we hit. Let's just cast this to our third person character just to make sure that if we're going to start marking things that it's going to be to the character that we want to hit. And the target, so what we did is we're parenting the billboard component to our target, which is the hit actor that we hit. And I think we can use keep world location. I think we can use keep world location on all of these. We'll see. We'll come back in a minute to see if we need to change that. And then there's one more thing. By default, a billboard component is not visible in game. So what we need to do is we need to set visibility on the billboard component, set it to be visible, and that we also need to use set hidden in game, and we want to make sure that's not checked so we're not hidden. So that'll fix that. And now if we try this out, we should spawn a billboard component, but now the last thing we need to do is we need to set, I think it's called sets, ooh, what is this? We're actually gonna have to search for one sec. I think it's set sprite, there it is. So a billboard component uses a two-dimensional sprite, so we'll use that. What we would like to use is this first person crosshair, but I'll show you why this is kind of an issue. So if we go through, and now what we're doing is when we click, we should draw, there you see it, we're gonna be drawing these crosshairs where we hit our target. But notice something with these crosshairs is that if I start to back up, you see they disappear. That's just a weird thing. I'm not exactly sure if that's a billboard scale issue or if that's something specific with the crosshairs material. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, instead of using that crosshair, for our purposes, I'm going to type, let's see here, what is it called? It's called, what is it called? It's the default actor. I don't know why I can't find it. So let's see real quick. Let me add a billboard component here. The default billboard is there. It is s_actor. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to punch in s_actor there as a sprite. The reason being is that that shows up at like any distance, so you can see that like that dinosaur head anywhere. So while it's going to look a little stupid for us, that's what we want, is that so it doesn't disappear based on distance. So that'll set that up. So now what we can do is we can go into slow motion, we can do our line traces, see where we hit, and we can spawn a billboard component there. And then what we want to do is off of this add billboard component, let's promote that to a variable, and we're just going to call this our hit array. And then with that new node that gets created, I actually want to delete it, and then I want to go back to our hit array, and I want to convert it into an array instead of being a single object reference. And now with that, we can get out our array, and at the very end of everything, let's add this new hit billboard into our array. So now what we can do is we can create our billboards, and that we can store all of them inside of an array, and then we'll use this in 1 minute to hit our targets. So now let's go back and let's set up the slow motion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in slow-mo, because that's what I created my input event, and that on slow-mo, what we want to do is we want to set our slow motion to be true, and we want to set our time dilation, set our global time dilation. This is how you do slow motion very easily in Unreal. Let's set it to be 0.2, so time will move at 1/5 speed. So that will work, and that what I want to do is I just want to make sure that before we hit this slow-mo, let's do a branch here, and let's make sure that if we do hit our button to go slow-mo, that we're not already inside of slow-mo. So if we're not inside of slow-mo and slow-mo is false, then we will go slow motion, and we'll do that. And then what we want to do is after we go slow motion, that's when we want to be able to spawn our projectiles. So a second ago, for testing purposes, I made it so that our slow motion by default was true. Let's uncheck that. So now let's try that out. So when we hit play, we're normal everything. We can shoot our gun like normal, but then when we hit shift, things go slow motion, and now I can mark our targets. So that's what we want. So now what we need to do is we need to make it so that when we let go of shift, or when we release all of our projectiles, or when we're ready to, that we will spawn all of our projectiles and they will start shooting out. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom event. Let's do it just up here. I'm going to make a new custom event, and I'm going to call it release shots. And we're going to use this event to set up how we are going to shoot all of our shots once we're ready. So I'm going to just do a little bit of kind of blocking here. I'm going to set up a branch here, and I'm just going to make sure that we're inside of slow motion before we write any code here, just so in case we run this event and we're not in slow motion, we don't do something weird. So what we want to do is we want to see with our hit array if our first index is valid. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our hit array. We're going to get the first index out of it, index 0, and we're going to see, is this index valid? So if we are in slow motion and slow motion is true, we're going to see if the first index of our hit array is valid. And if the index of our first hit array is valid, let's spawn a projectile. So what I actually want to do is I'm going to go to our normal projectile shooting code over here, and I'm going to function this. I'm going to highlight these 3 sections of code. This is going to play a recoil montage, spawn the projectile, and play a sound. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to make this a function, and I'm just going to call this shoot function. And that what we want to do now is we can feed in a transform, and that's where our bullet is going to shoot. So that's perfect. So now what we can do is if our hit array if our first index is valid, index 0, what we want to do is we want to call our shoot function. And now we need to know, well, where are we shooting? Well, what we want to do is we want to make a transform. And with this transform, what we care about is the location and the rotation. Well, the location of where we're spawning our projectile, on our gun, it's just this ending sphere. It's just this right here. It's just called sphere. So let's get that sphere, and let's get the world location. If you made your own guns in your own game, this part should be fairly obvious, because right, you're spawning where you normally spawn at the tip of your gun, right? That's just how it is. So we're going to spawn at that sphere, and now what we want to do is we want to make a rotation. Well, what is our rotation? Well, what we want to do is we want to use a node called find look at rotation. And what we can do is we can feed a starting vector and an ending vector, and it will give us a rotation. So we can plug in that rotation. Well, what's our starting location? Well, our starting location is the location on the tip of the gun, right? And what's our ending location? Well, the ending location is where we stored that hit target, right? So if we get the world location of that billboard that we attached to that character, that will give us that location. And remember, what we did right here is we attached that billboard. When we did our line trace and hit our target, we created the billboard and we attached it to that actor. And what that should do for us is that if that character moves around, that billboard should move around with it. It should stay attached where we made it, so that if that character moves, the billboard should go with it. If we did this properly, it should move with the character. So any movement shouldn't mess this up, since we're just getting location of that billboard. If the character moves, the billboard will move with it. And that should spawn our bullet just fine. We might need to change around some code in a minute, but I think that should do it just fine. And that after we shoot, what we want to do is we want to grab that index 0 and we want to destroy that billboard. So that once we shoot and aim at that billboard and shoot at it, we want to destroy it. And then after we destroy it, what we want to do with our array is we want to remove index 0. and I'll show you why that is. So what's going to happen is that, let's actually do like the little last piece of this. After we remove index 0, let's do a small delay. And once again, since we're moving at 1/5 time, if we do a delay of like 0.1, that means that this delay should actually be half a second at 1/5 speed. And that after we do this delay, we want to go all the way back, and we just want to feed right back into this is valid. So what's going to happen here is that when we say we mark 5 shots, what's going to happen is we're going to hit this release shots, and if we're in slow motion, we're going to check if index 0 is valid. If it's valid, we're going to shoot our projectile, we're going to destroy that billboard that we just aimed at, we're going to remove it out of our array, and then after the delay, we're going to come right back in, and we're going to say, hey, is index 0 valid? But if we have, say we have 5 shots queued up, so we have index 0 through index 4, we're going to shoot and do our thing at index 4, at index 0 first, and then after we use index 0, we're going to delete it out of the array, and then inside of the array, everything's going to move up. So now index 1 is going to be index 0, so once we come back through, we're going to be onto the next billboard, and essentially what we're doing here is we just created like a handmade loop, and we're going to loop through this until, guess what? Until the index 0 of the hit array is not valid, so that we've gone through the entire array of our hit targets. And that once we are done looping through our hit targets, we want to do a few things. The first thing we want to do is we want to set slow-mo to be false so that we're no longer in it. We want to set our time dilation back to 1 because that's normal, the normal speed of time, I guess. And we want to actually make one more boolean. And this boolean, we just want to call it releasing shots. And that we just want to make sure that we don't double run this event. So what we actually want to do is we want to change this first check right here, and we actually want to see if slow-mo and releasing shots is not true, right? So if we are already releasing shots, we don't want to run this. That's the purpose of that not, the and a not. So if we are slow motion and we are not already releasing shots, then we want to do this. But if we are already releasing shots, we're already doing our thing, right? So what we want to do is we want to set releasing shots to be true right after we do our check so that we are releasing shots. Now let's start doing it. And then after all of this, let's just set our releasing shots back to false. There we go. And that should work. So now what we want to do is, let's see, do we need to do any other checks? Let's see here. Let me just look real quick. I think this should work. Let's see. So let's also go on to, how are we going to release this, right? So let's go to our shift key. So when we release our shift key, let's just call release shots. Let's do that. So there we go. So I believe this is set up. So if we run through it really quick, when we hit shift, if we're not already in slow motion, we'll go slow motion and we'll slow down time. When we left click while we're in slow motion, we'll do a line trace out to see what we're hitting. If we do hit a target, we'll create a billboard component at that location. We'll set its visibility and stuff, and we'll set its sprite, and we'll add it to this hit array. And that once we're done shooting, what happens is that we can release shift, and that when we release shift, we will call this release shots event, and that we will start releasing shots, and that we will cycle through this array, through every index of this array, and we will shoot. Sorry, I had to burp there. We will shoot a shot at each of those billboards, and then after we shoot, we'll destroy the billboard, remove it from the index, and we loop back through. And then after we're done looping through the entire thing and that our hit array is finally empty, we will remove slow motion and we will set time back to be normal. Let's see if this works. So when we hit play, we can normally shoot, and that when I press shift, time slows down. I can mark some targets, and then when I release shift, you can see there that we shot at all 3 of our targets. So that's kind of the basics of this, and that we can flavor this up, I guess, a little bit if we wanted to. We can open it back up our character. Off of our camera, we can add a component with it selected, and we could add like a post-process. And inside of this, we can like change our white balance, we can set our temp, and that if we look at what that did, you can see how it kind of gives it like that weird Western feel. But we don't want that on all the time, so we can set that enabled to be false. And that when we do go slow motion, so where is it? On shift, when we do go slow motion, let's take our post process and let's set it to be enabled. Let's set that to be true. And that when we're done shooting and we turn off slow motion, let's set that post process back to false. So let's try that out real quick. So that'll give us like a little bit of a stylistic look to it. So we can hit play, and now when we hit shift, we can now visually see when we are inside of it and when we're outside of it. Another thing we could do is we could set up some ammo. So let's just do like a quick ammo in clip variable. We'll set that to be an integer, and we'll set that to be a normal variable. By default, we'll make it so that our gun holds 5 bullets, and that when we shoot, so when we're not in slow motion, let's do a branch, and let's see if our ammo and clip is greater than 0. And if it is, we are going to shoot, but along with shooting, we're going to take our variable and we're going to do minus minus, which subtracts 1 and sets that. So when we shoot, it'll go from 5 to 4. And let's also go into our slow motion, and let's check to make sure that we have ammo there too. So let's do that. Let's go over here, and let's actually do... should we just have included that? Yeah, let's just include that. Let's do that. We'll just include that into our first branch here. So if we're in slow motion, and actually no, we can't do that, can't we? That's a little awkward. Let's do it before. Yeah, that makes more sense. We'll do a branch right here. So we'll do a branch right here, and we'll check to see if our ammo and clip is greater than 0. If it is, then we will either shoot or we'll do our slow motion shooting. If we're not in slow motion, let's just decrement our integer. And if we are in slow motion, let's also decrement our integer up here. But for me, let's do it at the very end of our creating our billboard code, and let's do a branch right here. What we're going to do is right after we lower the ammo in our clip, we're just going to check to see what is our ammo, and we can check to see, let's just do equal to 0. If our ammo now is equal to 0 and we emptied our clip, let's call that release shots custom event, so that if we have, say, 5 bullets in our gun and we queue up 5 shots, once we queue up that 5th shot, it'll immediately release it for us and start shooting because we're out of ammo. So we'll call that release shots, so that'll work. And let's make our reload real quick because we made that custom event. And let's just make it really simple, no animation, no delay. And when we hit R to reload, let's just set the ammo in our clip back to 5. So let's try that out real quick. So what we just set up is we just check to see if we have ammo in our clip. If we have ammo in our clip when we shoot, we're just going to subtract 1 from our ammo. Along within the slow motion at the very end, we'll subtract 1 from our ammo. And if our ammo hits 0, we'll automatically call that release shots and not wait for us to let go of shift. And that when we hit our reload button, we will just set our ammo back to 5. So let's try that out. So I can shoot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I can't shoot anymore, but when I hit reload, I can then shoot 5 more. So let's try it. So I hit reload, so we have 5 bullets right here. So let's queue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it immediately releases for me, and we shoot our 5 bullets. That works pretty good. So now I don't have any ammo after reload. So let's actually queue it up. Let's shoot out 3 of our bullets, and now let's shoot 1, 2, and there you see it. It automatically releases and shoots. So that's pretty much it. From here, you can add sound effects, you can add like whooshes, you can blend things in and out, you could do some cool visual effects, but that's pretty much it, guys. It's really simple in that we're looking to set time dilation down. We can change like the color of our screen, but what we really want to do is we want to take our normal shooting code that we might have, and we just want to do a line trace off of it. And with those line traces, we want to create some type of visual effect to show the player where they have like marked a hit location, and we want to store that hit location so that later when we release, we can just shoot at those hit locations. And once again, it happens in order. So that's pretty much it, guys. If we just want to quickly peek over the code one more time, when we fire, we're checking to see if we have ammo, and if we're in slow motion, we're doing a line trace for objects. We're making sure we hit our character, and if we did hit our character, we're going to spawn a billboard at the location of our hit location. We're going to attach it, set its visibility, add it to our array. We're going to reduce our ammo, and if our ammo is 0, we're going to release our bullets, and that our shooting code is simply just if we're inside of slow motion and we aren't already releasing our shots, we're going to start releasing our shots, and we're going to loop through that hit array that we made, and we're just going to constantly use index 0, and with index 0 we're going to spawn a projectile, and we're going to aim it with the find look at rotation from the end of our gun to the location of that hit. The world location of that hit is our target. That's our ending rotation. Spawn our bullet, play our recoil, play our audio. Or wait, why didn't I use the shoot function there? That's weird. We should have used the, oh, I'm inside the wrong place, aren't I? Sorry about that. That's funny. This is actually the code that we were using. That was the other project that we were in a second ago. Sorry about that. And let's see, where's that shoot code? There it is. There's the shoot code. And we use that shoot function. We destroyed it. We removed the index. We delay. And that's about it, guys. And then we set our booleans back to false so that we're back to normal and our time goes back to normal. That's it. From here, this is just plug into your own game. And really, where you plug it in at is just really your shooting. You're just checking to see if you're in slow motion, and you add essentially this code, and that when you release, you're adding this code, and we have our slow motion. And that's pretty much it. This can be plugged into almost any shooting system. Third person, first person. What really matters is that you do your line traces properly based on how you're shooting in your game. And that's it, guys. That's how simple the Red Dead Redemption's kind of shooting is. And I think it's really cool because it's a cool effect for their game. I think two, it helps them balance difficulty in that A, it's already pretty hard to aim with controllers in that game, and B, it enables the player to kind of get out of unrealistic situations. If they didn't have that system and they threw like 20 enemies at the player, it would be hard to kill them. But when you have like this kind of hackery slow motion, you can easily queue up 10 kills pretty quickly. And it also kind of fits like the Wild Wild West theme of that they're like these fairy tale, larger than life, super reflex human beings. So it's pretty cool. It fits their game, it fits their style, and enables some cool game mechanics. And that's it, guys. I hope you learned something. Let me know if you want to see any other kind of cool mechanics of games, and let me know, and I'll do it. And that'll be it, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.